Welcome to Vape News Radio, the voice of vaping. In each show, we share the latest about regulations and things you need to know, plus upcoming conferences and fests, along with interviews with the movers and shakers in this fabulous vape space. Are you looking to get into this ever-expanding marketplace? Do you want to master this industry? Listen up as Norm Bauer, the Vape Mentor, shares it all. And here's your host, Norm Bauer.
Hello and welcome to Vape Radio, the voice of vaping, and this is show number 79. I'm Norm Bauer with Vape Mentors, and today's show is sponsored by Level 13 Liquids. Are you concerned about PMTA? Do you not have a juice line and maybe you want one? Level 13 offers you a turnkey program that you can get house brand on your shelves in just a few weeks. If you are concerned about the August 8th deadline, then let us know and we'll get you started with our own house line. Also, wanted to let you know that Vape U3 Vape Shop Master Summit is coming on June 23rd. 4 days, 20 hours, over 20 instructors. If you have a vape shop and want to be one of the survivors, please join us. Marketing, sales, technology, regulations, and much more will all be included. Oh, and by the way, it's free. On to our countdown, August 8th. And there's a lots of pieces in motion. There seems to be more engagement with regulators than I have ever seen, and all the advocacy groups are pulling in great support. If you are not yet involved with any of them, I encourage you to do so. The biggest at-risk businesses seem to be e-liquid manufacturers, and we have lots of them in this country. Somewhere north of about 9,000, I have heard. If you are concerned about PMTA, we wanted to let you know we're forming a division within Vape Mentors to address the transition and options. Let us know if you'd like to talk about that. Meanwhile, today's interview is with RonTully, a name you may have heard before if you are in the liquid biz. Stay tuned, it's coming right up. I mentioned in the last show that I'm going to be speaking in Amsterdam in July at Vape Expo, and if you are in the EU or based somewhere in Europe, I'd love to connect. 2 weeks later, I'll be in Prague, and between those 2 dates, I'll be touring as many companies and shops as I can. Would you like to connect? Let me know via norm@vapementors.com. Also coming up in a few weeks is the most complete online vape training program you'll ever find. Starting June 23rd and continuing for 4 days, we'll be offering 20 hours and 20 plus speakers as part of the Vape U3 format. More info is available at vapementors.com. The world of vape is certainly changing, and you must change with it. This FDA debacle is not my first crisis, and it may not be my last. But what I can tell you after living through 4 recessions and many downturns, the key to survival, it's adaptation. If you think you can keep doing what you're doing, you might as well go away right now and leave more fruit for those of us that will adapt. This is also a nice intro to our interview today, since it is all about adapting to a brand new market. When I first heard the term tobacco-free nicotine, it took me a moment to figure out what that meant. Another name for it is synthetic nicotine, but that term synthetic is not a popular one, kind of like GMO. But there may be advantages to TFN, as RonTully calls it. Better flavor, no aftertaste, easier to mix with. These are all good. The bad, it's a little bit pricier than regular nicotine, but not enough to dissuade you. And after all, you do get what you pay for. I've commented before about the connoisseurs of vaping for a long time, and this may be the holy grail. When you combine TFN, or tobacco-free nicotine, with high-quality ingredients, what do you get? Pretty awesome flavor. And we'll be offering you an incentive to try it, but you'll have to read the show notes. So, on with the show. Hello and welcome back to Vape Radio. This is Norm Bauer, the voice of vaping. It's no big surprise, ladies and gentlemen, that there are a lot of changes going on and will be going on in the vaping industry in the years to come. The regs are out. They haven't gone into effect quite yet, but there's a lot of conversations about tobacco versus non-tobacco, nicotine versus non-nicotine, and of course a lot of people have asked the question, do the deeming regulations affect my product if I sell a zero nicotine product? I have my opinion, I have my answer, but I'm going to go actually to the source of where we're going to ask that question. And the gentleman's name is RonTully. Ron, you might recognize the name, has been around for several years in the vaping industry and also previously in the tobacco industry. and he is the owner of TNV Ventures, and they have come up with what I call a very unique, very innovative product, and it is called tobacco-free nicotine. And with that as a little teaser, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Ron to the show. So Ron, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. That's a great opportunity to talk to your listeners. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. So tobacco-free nicotine, when I first heard that term, it took me a while to kind of put the pieces together in my mind. And I said, oh, is that synthetic nicotine? So did I reach the right conclusion, or tell us what tobacco-free nicotine really is?
Well, I think people get a little bit confused about what TFN is. We refer to it as TFN, which is synthetically derived nicotine. It's not made or derived from tobacco, which sounds like a little bit of a scientific explanation. But if I go back and explain, there are really three sources of nicotine. The first source is made and derived from tobacco. The second source is made and derived from food extracts. Most people may know or may not know, but you can get small amounts of trace nicotine in potatoes, tomatoes, various other plants, and it is possible to do extractions, but you need a lot of mass. And then the third source for nicotine is synthetically derived. And the company I'm an investor in through TNV Ventures is Next Generation Labs, and I'm a shareholder in that company, and we focus on chemically derived, synthetically derived nicotine.
All right, so I'll tell you what, let's go back to the beginning. So talk to us about nicotine, because you certainly know more about it than I do, and probably most of the people listening right now. Of course, like most people, I've heard that nicotine is in different products. Is tobacco just the most concentrated, the strongest ingredient you're going to get? Is that how the whole tobacco thing started, centuries ago, because of the high concentration of nicotine in a tobacco leaf?
Well, people don't smoke for tobacco, people smoke for nicotine. And so that's the sort of answers your question in a nutshell. And tobacco is a plant that's very abundant with high nicotine concentrations. And there are very few plants in the world that are so rich in sources of nicotine. There are one or two others in terms of indigenous plants in Australia, but they're not commercially viable outside of the tobacco world. So tobacco became pervasive, and over the centuries, nicotine yields have improved, and now it's the primary source of all nicotine used in the vaping industry.
Awesome.
There's very little food-extracted nicotine used in the vape industry, and I guess we're coming up as an ambitious second with Next Generation Labs with our TFN nicotine in terms of offering a synthetically derived nicotine.
All right, so from a medical standpoint, how is nicotine classified? Because I always hear it compared to caffeine, which is a mild energy booster. Is that a good analogy? Clinically, how do we define what nicotine is?
Well, nicotine's an alkaloid, and so what it does is it stimulates. When your body takes it in, the nicotine molecules attach to the dopamines, which gives people a sense of satisfaction in relation to their enjoyment with the product. And there's an awful lot of alkaloids like that that stimulate, and consumers enjoy it. Purely beneficial product in the sense of the well-being it gives individuals. They become highly satisfied. For some people, it increases their level of alertness when they consume nicotine. For other people, it's relaxant, and it has many benefits for adult consumers.
All right, so one of the controversies out there is nicotine addictive. What do you say?
Well, I think the consensus in the medical community is that nicotine is addictive. And I think FDA is declaring that it's part of the whole labeling on vaping products and tobacco products going forward. But it's generally been accepted within the scientific community and the tobacco industry that nicotine is addictive, yes.
All right, so if you take a conventional tobacco analog cigarette, about how many milligrams of nicotine is in one of those?
Well, it really depends on how the cigarette is constructed. And
Agreed.
There's a lot of design around the cigarette as to how consumers satiate themselves relative to consumption of nicotine. But if a consumer is consuming a high tar, high nicotine product, then their body will titrate. That means consumers will adjust their consumption to get to the level of nicotine that they need relatively quickly. But tobacco manufacturers have put a lot of design and development into cigarettes over the years in order to give consumers different levels of nicotine satisfaction according to the type of cigarette they smoke, based on the design of the tobacco, based on the design and construction of the physical characteristics of the cigarette itself. So there's a lot that goes into delivering nicotine in a conventional form.
Excellent. And of course, the conventional wisdom and the actual scientific proof says that nicotine in of itself is not dangerous. It's a delivery vehicle, which is the inhalation of tobacco through ignition, through combustion. So I wanted to kind of go over what we just went over as a premise, because we have a lot of people listening to Vape Radio that are in the business, and so they know a lot of these things, but a lot of people who are listening are consumers, and they might not know these things. So I thought it was going to be important to set a foundation, a benchmark about nicotine overall. So since I've been in the industry, which is almost 3 years, I have absolutely seen a decline in the nicotine percentages of most of the vaping products out there. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that's a result of consumers. Well, it really is a number of different factors. There are consumers who want to move completely away from nicotine towards zero levels of vaping in terms of nicotine content. And that's certainly a proportion of the market where consumers are graduating down, because they really want to exit their consumption of nicotine, but they still want to enjoy the olfactory and sensational aspects of what would be a mimicked smoke experience. And
Right.
vape to some extent does that, and that's certainly one group of consumers. I think for other consumers, there's a desire there to limit the amount of nicotine intake they have, and so they tend to move to much lower dosages of nicotine in terms of the liquids that they consume. In fact, I don't think you see that many high nicotine vape products out there, particularly in liquid bottles. You may see those in cigar-like products, but you certainly don't see them in liquid bottles. And I think that's because consumers of those bottle products are actually starting to graduate, to move away to a great extent from high nicotine consumption to something that is, I think, socially more beneficial for them, personally beneficial for them. And they're finding a level of satisfaction with a lower level of nicotine consumption.
I definitely concur with you. I know that when I started, there was a lot of vape shops in Southern California, which is where I live, that were carrying 18 milligrams, sometimes even 24 milligrams. You rarely see that anymore here. I think most people are carrying anywhere from 0 to 6s. Sometimes they'll go into the 12s, the 1.5s when they're available, seem to be very popular. And except for some states on the East Coast that are heavy tobacco state users, like the North Carolina, Virginia's, Kentucky, Georgia, they seem to be a little bit higher in nicotine demand than a lot of other places in the country. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Because, you know, you have a very interesting background as far as how you got into tobacco and how you transitioned. So before we actually start talking about your tobacco-free nicotine, I want you to tell us how you got involved, why you got involved, and why you think this product is so innovative and revolutionary, which, by the way, I think it is innovative and revolutionary, and it could change a lot of things as time goes on. So share with us a little bit about your history, sir.
Well, my background is essentially from the tobacco industry. I first started working for tobacco companies way back 1988, so it gives you a sense of how far back I go in this industry. And I worked both internationally and domestically here in the United States. And so my engagement has been with both large and small tobacco companies, many of whom have been innovative in terms of introducing new products, including, new oral tobacco products. I decided I wanted to move on from being in tobacco once I engaged with the vape industry, and really saw an opportunity with the potential development of the vape segment and consumer attitudes towards tobacco generally shifting away from, hey, I don't want to even consume anything to do with tobacco, but I still want to consume nicotine, to the extent that I find a great opportunity with Dr. Michael Arnold, who developed a patent for synthetic nicotine. So I linked up with Michael Arnold and Vincent Schumann, his business partner, and some other business partners who part-funded this venture. We put some money into it, and we wanted to see whether or not it would be possible to give adult consumers completely different type of nicotine, which was not made or derived from tobacco. So for some consumers, that's quite important, because they want to move away completely from any sense of tobacco in their vaping experience. So that's certainly one part of the marketplace that we are very interested in seeing develop with our adult consumers who no longer really want anything to do with tobacco, even to the extent of the nicotine being derived from tobacco. And that may be a subset of the vaping community, because I know some people very much enjoy the tobacco absolute flavor systems that are in e-liquids. But what we're trying to do is offer something that's a complete breakaway from that. And when we looked at the marketplace, we looked at it really in a number of different ways. Hey, there's an opportunity here for offering adult consumers something here in the vaping industry. Hey, if we can get this product commercially scaled in the right way, then maybe we can even have an influence in terms of offering synthetically derived nicotine to the pharmaceutical industry, so they're no longer dependent on tobacco extracts for nicotine replacement therapies they have there. And also within the scientific community, there's a need for a reference nicotine product, which is really a very pure molecule, and we thought that we could have some opportunity in that marketplace as well by offering the scientific community access to a very clean type of molecule that hadn't really been available on the market before at anything close to a reasonable price. Because I don't know if you're aware, or your listeners would be aware, but 5 years ago, a kilo of synthetic nicotine would cost you $125,000. That's how expensive it was.
A kilo?
Yes.
2.2 pounds. Okay.
Yeah, it would cost about $125,000 from a company called Sigma Aldrich. And so when we looked at that marketplace, we thought, hey, there's got to be a better way for synthesizing nicotine so that we can produce it at more commercially viable levels so that adult consumers could get the benefit of that in relation to vaping products. I mean, that's a relatively simple market in which to make a unique offering. And then as we started to understand what we were doing in terms of developing this patented process for scaling up synthetic nicotine, we realized, hey, this product actually has a wider range of benefits outside of simply vaping, including potential application in nicotine replacement therapies and so on.
So, Ron, let me jump in there. So from a consumer standpoint, I'm out there vaping and I have a choice between buying a regular e-liquid, let's just say a zero nicotine product, or even something with nicotine, versus one of yours with a tobacco-free nicotine. What will I as a consumer notice as far as the difference between the two? Or will I notice a difference between the two?
Oh, I think consumers do notice, and we have 14 brands already that are actively purchasing our product. And the feedback we get from consumers is that, hey, this product is odorless, so there's no off smell. That's the first thing that's significant about synthetic nicotine. And it's also tasteless in that you don't get that residual tobacco taste in the background with our nicotine. So the clarity of it is very clear. I mean, it's almost like it's as clear as water, as provided it's good water from a good source. So it's as clear as pure water, and it's odorless and it's tasteless. And so when a consumer experiences our product in, say, something like the Nectar brand that Charm Permoiden produces, that product, what you're able to enjoy is all the benefits of the stimulation of the nicotine, but without the off taste. And so you're able to really experience the full benefit of the flavors without those interfering characteristics of the tobacco-derived nicotine. So I think there are some very direct benefits for consumers when they try our nicotine. It certainly doesn't have that off note in terms of smell, and it certainly doesn't have that off taste in terms of consumption.
Excellent. So, I have some friends in the business that are major manufacturers of nicotine, Nic Select. And obviously pure unadulterated nicotine is very dangerous to deal with. And so typically they will either sell it in different dilutions, or sometimes they'll use a middle person like Nicotine River to do it. So is your type of nicotine, is it also a dangerous product, or are some of those risks removed by creating it molecule by molecule?
No, the risks are not removed. Nicotine is nicotine. So The molecular construct of the product is the same. The derivation is the difference. So any handling of nicotine has to be done in the right way. And we are essentially, as Next Generation Labs, is essentially a producer. And so we are not competing with our own brands in the market. We essentially supply products as a raw material to companies that have the capability and the technical expertise to appropriately handle nicotine, but more significantly know how to mix this product in the right way so that the consumer gets the best of what our product is able to offer. But we are very careful, like all nicotine suppliers, in the way in which we package and ship our product. I mean, for example, we actually ship in stainless steel flasks in 1 liter bottles that are packed out very carefully according to transportation requirements for shipping pure nicotine. And we follow all the recommendations in terms of safety and packaging, and all the safe handling requirements are clearly specified in each shipment as to how each of these facilities should be handling our nicotine. Most of the companies who are working with us are very experienced in handling nicotine. We are just not selling pure nicotine on the open market, people who are not capable of understanding what the profile of that product means with that sort of purity characteristic.
Got it. So, Ron, let me ask you. So, at one time, you were paying 6-figure plus for a kilo of synthetic nicotine. So, what about are the price ranges today in 2016?
Well, I mean, the pricing is still high. We're probably around about $5,000 a kilo compared to or a litre, compared to $125,000 a litre that Sigma Aldrich charged. But when you really break that down, when on a bottle-by-bottle basis, sometimes the nicotine, even our nicotine, is cheaper than the bottle or the packaging the liquid is packed in. So on a per-unit basis, really for what the consumer is wanting, which is the experience of a very good nicotine, it's actually very good value for money, because when you break it down to a per milliliter basis in terms of the amount of nicotine that can go into a single bottle of e-liquid, it works out about 19 cents a bottle. I mean, it's not huge. So, yeah, there's a sort of sticker shock immediately. Wow, $5,000 a litre.
Right.
That's hugely expensive compared to, say, $400 or $300 a litre for tobacco-derived nicotine. But the fact is, that's the primary ingredient that the consumer is looking for in terms of the experience in the product. So paying a little bit more, I think, is worth it.
Well, this speaks to the consumer as far as whether they want to buy price or whether they want to buy value. There's a lot of things you're going to pay a little bit more for. Some things you're going to pay a lot more for, but you're going to find it lasts a lot longer. And the most obvious example is authentic hardware versus clones. You know, you might pay $100 for an authentic, and you might get a clone for $70, and you think you're getting a hell of a deal. But meanwhile, that clone is going to last you a percentage of the time that authentic's going to last you. So I want to go into, as we kind of bring this to a conclusion, and by the way, we've covered a lot of scientific grounds, and that was done intentionally. As we were contemplating this interview, Ron, I wanted you to be able to share the experience of where nicotine came from and what the nicotine industry is all about, because this is a major topic of conversation, ladies and gentlemen, and now it's even more topical because of the FDA. So obviously the FDA regulations are in place, and there was a lot of conversations, including at an event that I recently attended in Las Vegas that I believe you were at as well. And the question is that does the FDA regulations, do they affect something without any nicotine whatsoever? So I was given an answer, but I would like it to come right from the horse's mouth. So where does tobacco-free nicotine stand in regards to what the deeming regulations are going to mandate?
Well, the deeming regulation is essentially the beginning of a regulatory process, not the end. And
agreed, by the way. Yeah. Agreed.
Most people think it's finality when actually it's the genesis of something, and we have a long way to go in terms of how FDA will view different products and different characteristics of products. But one of the key messages to take away from Zeller was that, hey, different attributes for different products will be looked at on a case-by-case basis from FDA. So there's a sort of underlying message that you need to understand. But let's get down to what is and is not covered.
Thank you.
Essentially, the deeming regulation defines a tobacco product as made or derived from tobacco.
Right.
Well, clearly synthetic nicotine is not made or derived from tobacco. And in fact, we can demonstrate that because none of the raw materials that we use in the construction of and building our nicotine molecule has any tobacco-derived component in it.
Correct.
In fact, one of the things that we ask our manufacturers to do is, if ever you're using a TFN, you should never mix any tobacco-derived components with it. So don't mix tobacco absolute as a flavor or any type of derived flavor system from the tobacco plant, because then it has the potential to be treated as a tobacco product. So if you keep the product as clear away from tobacco-derived components as you possibly can, then at this time it's currently not regulated by FDA as a tobacco product. So that's the simplest definition. It's not made or derived from tobacco.
Right.
So how does FDA potentially regulate? And I think that's really what you're trying to get to, and this is where the confusion is. Well, FDA has broadly defined parts and components of a tobacco product as being a tobacco product. So what does that mean? Well, in the case of devices, it means that if you use a device with an e-liquid that is made or derived from tobacco, the device itself is a tobacco product. And it also means that if you have a device that is designed and suitable for use and intended to be used as a tobacco product, and you use a no-nicotine liquid in that device, then FDA is attempting, and I say attempting, to suggest that that liquid used in that device is now a component of a tobacco product.
And that, by the way, is where these conversations started. And, when the regs came out, I was flooded with calls and emails, as I'm sure you were. And the question was, what about nicotine-free products? They're not necessarily synthetic, but just when you sell a 0 milligram nicotine. And the consensus was that, yes, you can call it a duck or you can call it a horse. It doesn't matter, but the FDA is going to regulate it regardless. So I think that we're all in agreement that the FDA will, as a blanket statement, oversee everything. But, you said something that I think was very important. And that is, this fight is far from over. If you put this in terms of a 10-round heavyweight fight, we're probably, 1/3, 1/4 through this fight, and we've got a long way to go. And what I see is that there's obviously more engagement with the public, more engagement with the B2B community about advocacy, about fighting back, about engaging politicians. We've had several interviews on Vape Radio with some people who are very significant in this space. So the reality of it is, Ron, as I'm sure you'll agree, is that there's still a lot of fight left in this dog. And your background before, you were heavily involved with SFATA, is that correct?
Yeah, I was on the board of SFATA, and now I'm on the board of the Vapor Technology Association, which know is being the trade association that's worked very hard in terms of the Cole-Bishop Amendment. It's the VTA that's actually driven that particular initiative.
Right.
And prior to that, I was heavily involved in the HR 2058, which was the coal bill itself, and much of the strategy that was developed around trying to get the carve-outs for the vaping industry in relation to ring-fencing FDA spending on the deeming regulation and in relation to moving the 2007 grandfather date. Those were initially developed by, if you like, a wise group of individuals who have been around the policy circles of Washington for a long time. And we've had some success in driving forward the Cole-Bishop Amendment, as you saw with its adoption in the Agriculture Committee. And now we've just got to continue driving it. What I'm hoping for is consensus amongst all impacted industries, not just the vape community, but, the pipe tobacco guys are as impacted as the vape guys, as are the cigar guys, as are the hookah guys. We're all in the same boat here, and everyone needs to be supporting Cole-Bishop in terms of driving forward something that I think will at least be a buffer towards FDA coming in and essentially brutalizing this industry very quickly. But I just wanted to add something in relation to the nicotine. It was just to sort of finish off that little analysis I was doing. Look, the synthetic nicotine is not made or derived from tobacco. And I certainly take the view, and many in the legal community take a similar view. It's really down to intent when you're dealing with FDA. And what is our intent? Well, our intent is not to sell synthetic nicotine as a tobacco product. Our intent is to sell synthetic nicotine as a recreational nicotine product to adult consumers. Does that mean it's impacted by the deeming regulation? I think that issue ultimately will either be settled by Congress or it will be settled by the courts, one or the other. But in the interim, the way in which you market your product as a tobacco product, and the way in which you brand your product in relation to other brands that may be made or derived from tobacco, I think will be a significant test in FDA's determination on that case-by-case analysis as to whether you are or are not a tobacco product.
Agreed.
And I don't believe our product is a tobacco product. It's not made or derived from tobacco, and it's not intended to be used as a tobacco product. And we will be encouraging our manufacturers to make the appropriate declarations on their product.
Well, I'll use an analogy from my previous career when I used to be in the lending business. And the word lending and the word logic both start with the letter L, but doesn't mean they have anything in common. And when it comes to what the FDA is doing, logic totally went out the door. And obviously that's a conversation that we're going to share another time. So let's put our marketing hat on for a second, Ron. Obviously, you are looking to expand the exposure to your tobacco-free nicotine products. So should someone want to get a hold of you and either one, talk to you about integrating tobacco-free nicotine into their product, I want you to give everyone the best contact information. And also, two, you had mentioned that your product is in 14 different brands. And if you can name some of those brands, if you have the ability to do that, that would be great. I know of Nectar, of course, because Charn is a friend and a supporter of what we do here. But again, share with us how to reach you. And also let us know what to do in regards to finding some of this product so they can, let their tongue speak for itself, so to speak.
Well, we're a manufacturer of raw materials, so we don't particularly advocate for individual brands. I don't want to pick out, of the 14. Some feel I'm being fair and some feel I'm not being fair.
That's fine.
I'd rather say consumers go discover TFN for yourself. But in relation to contacting me, you can call me on 917-596-8567, and I'll be happy to talk to anyone about what we're doing with TFN and give you more insights as to what we believe the benefits of that product are to adult consumers. But our market is growing, and there's a lot of interest in substituting tobacco-derived nicotine for TFN, and we hope that adult consumers, with the acceptance that they have for the flavor profile of the product, continue to enjoy it, and we hope that manufacturers who are considering utilizing the product in their brands do so, hopefully before August 8th, 2016.
Most excellent. Well, listen, you have been a font of information. We covered a lot of territory in the last 30 minutes. So I want to thank you so much for sharing and obviously for doing what you're doing, because one of the facts that we have to acknowledge is that innovation is going to be very, very important as we move forward, both in hardware products, in liquid products, and now, of course, with the product that you've been involved with, tobacco-free nicotine. So thank you so much for joining us here on Vape Radio, Ron.
All right. Thanks, Norm. Thank you to your listeners. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Do not go away, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be right back. We'll let you know as we get a little bit more information about tobacco-free nicotine products, and we're curious to see how the regulators explain they're wanting to control a product without tobacco and without nicotine. One more time, don't forget Vape U3 Vape Shop Master Summit, which is launching on June 23rd. Visit vapementors.com for more information. For 4 days, for 20 hours, 20-plus speakers of the most amazing thought leaders of the industry will be sharing their information. The event will be free, and recordings of the event will be amazingly affordable for those that commit early. We also wanted to let you know of something that recently happened. Blue, that's BLU, they created a unique opportunity to ask a question of one of the most major influencers in the vape space, Han Leek. He was the engineer that came up with the original patent about 2003 and would be considered the Adam of Adam and Eve lore simply because he was where it all started. The company, Blue, asked people to ask questions, and they chose one of mine. What did I ask? My question was, when you came up with your ideas 15 years ago, did you have any idea or vision of the impact it might create in the tobacco industry? So as I get more information about when that's going to be shared, I'll go ahead and let you know. And that wraps up Vape Radio Show number 79, and thanks again for listening. Do you have a topic you'd like to hear or something to share? Someone you'd like us to speak with? Send me a note to norm@vapementors.com. And before we leave, I wanted to offer you all a great opportunity. Would you like to get your product, service, or message in front of our targeted vaping audience? Vape Radio is the #1 radio show in the world with more than 1.3 million downloads since 2014. We were one of the top 10 business podcasts of 2015 on Podbean and beat out more than 130,000 other shows. For just $750, you get your company integrated within 3 different vape radio shows, and we're looking for 2 more advertisers to fill our spots. How about you? Write me at norm@vapementors.com. And now, we're done. So until next time, vape on!